right? Like the wife beating one is one that a lot of Muslims that do not want to support wife beating struggle with, right? Like to try to make that seem something else is really hard.
So does it specifically say you can beat your wife in the Quran?
It's worse than that. It doesn't say you can beat your wife. It says it's a command.
It's a command to beat your wife.
To beat your wife, and not when she is disobedient, but when you only fear disobedience, right? So even before she's disobedient, right? So again, I don't want to get right now into how, unless you're interested in what excuses they have for that. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot of gymnastic arguments in trying to come up with excuses for that. But what I want to point out is that there's a silver lining when it comes to a lot of Muslims trying to make excuses for that verse, to try to say why this is not actually wife beating, right? Uh-huh. What we do point out is that no, this is clearly promoting wife beating,
right?
But I'm also interested in pointing out that the fact that a lot of Muslims are trying to make it seem like this is not wife beating means that they do not like wife beating,
right?
Right. So, to me, what I always say is that most Muslims are better than Islam. That's what I say.
Most Muslims are better than Islam. Right.
Just like most Christians are better than Christianity.
But Islam is perfect according to Muslims.
No. I mean, let me tell you, I think at some point when we keep attacking Islam, which I have, and I keep encouraging people to do, I'm pointing out the flaws in Islam, I'm pointing out another religions, another dogma, another superstition, I'm pointing out why it's wrong and why it's bad for humanity, and at some point pointing them out, I feel like, well, where do we go from here? We know this is wrong, right? But what do we do with that information? Because just telling people why this is wrong is not really that productive, right? How could we reach out to the other side, right? How could we reach out and make a difference, right? And I think that recognizing some common goals with the other side, and recognizing some things that we agree on, and recognizing similar goals. Like, for example, if you look at even Muslim fundamentalists, right? Even the ones that maybe agree with us that some of these verses mean actually what they say they are saying, right? So the so-called moderate Muslims, right, which take, who are farther away from Islam, in my opinion,
right? Just Muslim by name.
Well, no, that's nominal Muslim, but I have my own categories. Right. Get into that. No, but it's easy to find agreements with those. For example, like a lot of them agree with secularism, free speech, women's rights, gay rights. Even though what they believe in is not, they say it's compatible with Islam, and we think it's not, and we think Islam doesn't promote those things, at least we could recognize them as good people that want to promote the same ideas that we do, even though we disagree with them that this is according to Islam or not, right? But even with the fundamentalist ones that read the Quran and the Hadith and the Tafsir and biography of Muhammad, and they have the same understanding as anybody that is being honest reading the text would have. What at the end of the day, what a lot of them, the end goal is to improve our well-being, okay?
Even with the violence.
I mean, their understanding of what improves well-being is very different from us, right? Especially because in their calculation, this is not the only life. You have also the next life.
Afterlife,
yeah. But so their conclusion on how to maximize well-being is very different from us. But at the end of the day, the goal is to maximize well-being.
But, okay, so if we look at, like, last Tuesday in Sydney, I don't know if you know, there was a guy on the streets of Sydney, Australia, who went on a stabbing spree. Stabbed a woman, stabbed a few other people. And he screamed, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, okay, as he was doing this. You know, some of the residents of the town, like, reprimanded him and waited for the police. So my question now is, like, when I say about religion of peace, I'm saying if a Muslim that calls himself a Muslim is stabbing people randomly on the street, what does that have to do with the ideology.
Well, yeah,
where do they get that?
Okay, but I'm talking about the fundamentalists that do not go randomly stab people in the street, right? Because even the fundamentalists are not going to do that, right? I don't know who this guy. I don't know what was this guy like. Okay in the head or not? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
But then why would they call?
No.
Why call upon the God of Islam?
I'm not saying Islam was not an influence, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm not just gonna. Okay, so even if somebody has psychological issues, right? I don't know. I'm not a mental health professional, right? I do know that religion is not a good mix with that, right?
I agree.
So
I agree.
So people say people say somebody this is a mental issue, not a religion issue. I'm like, yeah, but imagine if somebody's hearing voices, right? And they have a mental issue, and I go tell them, instead of giving them the help they need, I go tell them like the voices that you hear in your head is coming from a position of authority, and this is a real thing. You need to listen to it.
Right.
So I'm not really helping in that situation, and I think. Even if you're mentally unstable, adding mixing religion to that is a toxic mix, right? So religion is still responsible for harm, even if it's not the only factor.
The thing is about, to cut you, sorry. The thing is about when you hear of these terror attacks and you hear people screaming Allahu Akbar, on a constant basis. I've always said because when we kind of speak to the general public,
right,
and we say, is Islam violent? They say, oh, no, Islam's peaceful and, it was just a lone crazy person. However, I would say this. My name is Sarah Garvey, right? And I class myself as Pan-African. So if a bunch of Pan-Africanists all of a sudden started doing terror attacks and screaming, Sarah Garvey,
right,
Sarah Garvey, at some point the public should say, hang on a minute, what are they getting from Sarah Garvey as to why these things keep happening?
Right. So it is because of Islam. I'm not going to deny that. Right. But by the way, if we have time at some point, I want to ask you about the Pan-African.
Of course, of course.
What I'm saying is that what ISIS does, what Al Qaeda does, is because of Islam. Okay.
Right.
It's not. There are other factors, but one of the main factors is Islam. Okay. The political, economical factors, war, poverty, whatever, but it's not just Islam, but Islam is a big deal.
It's a big deal
in that calculation. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is that the problem with Islam is way more, the way Islam is toxic to humanity, the way it damages humanity is way beyond terror attacks.
Wow.
Okay, way more. That's just a fraction of the influence that Islam has on our society. Most of the influence of bad ideas are not newsworthy, right? Like they are not the background noise. Do you want to say?
No, it's fine.
Okay. They are not, when there's an explosion here, the terror attack here, even if you focus on just violence, right? Most of the violence that captures people's attention, and violence is here in London, in Sydney, in Paris, United States somewhere, but most of the Islamic terror attacks happens in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, exactly. And people don't seem to care, even though that's where most of the cost is.
Yeah.
But even if you just, as tragic as these are, what is a more constant harm is the way people are treated in Saudi Arabia,
right,
in Iran, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Indonesia, in Malaysia. The way that the government, the threat to free speech, the threat to women's rights, the threat to gay rights, trans rights, the threat to the economy. Islam has a huge influence on how people run the economy, and every small decision that they make that is based on faith rather than reason affects people's lives has a ripple effect on people's life in a way that is we're not even to calculate. Let me tell you, when I